Hey everybody, welcome to day 4 of the Ikoria Lair of Behemoths set review on the Mana Leek. I'm John as always, and we've got all the red cards today that we're going to look at from a limited perspective. We're talking draft and we're talking sealed. We're going to jump on in right away with Blazing Volley. Blazing Volley is a single red mana for a sorcery at common. Blazing Volley deals 1 damage to each creature your opponents control. No, there's no cycling on this. It's not instant speed for some reason. No. Do not want this at sorcery speed. Should be sided in the rare situation that your opponent happens to be really deep on X ones. But this is a D-. This is, possibly one of the worst cards in the set. D- for Blazing Volley. Up next is Blister Spit Gremlin. Blister Split Gremlin is a single red mana for a creature gremlin at common. It's a 1/1. Pay 1, tap. Blister Spit Gremlin deals 1 damage to each opponent. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, untap Blister Spit Gremlin. They have attached a mana cost to a pinger, and that makes me incredibly sad. This card is so significantly worse than it could have been. We have had cards like this that you just tap, you don't pay mana, and they on-tap because something happened. I don't know why they felt the need to tack a mana onto this. This is unfortunately significantly worse than it could have been. It's possibly still okay, but I don't think so. I think putting a mana cost on this has significantly powered it down. I'll keep an eye on it just because maybe you just have enough mana. Maybe the spells you're casting are so cheap that you're going to have that extra mana to get that extra ping in. But I don't know. I really hate for all of the stuff they've done to other cards, making them massively overpowered. I don't know why this got nerfed so badly. I'm going to give this like a C-, although I think it's even worse than that. I think you just don't want to play this, even in the blue-red spells deck. I'll keep an eye on it, but man, this makes me sad. Up next is Bliss of the Thunder Raptor. Blitz of the Thunder Raptor is 1 and a red for an instant at uncommon. Blitz of the Thunder Raptor deals damage to target creature or planeswalker equal to the number of instant and sorcery cards in your graveyard. If that creature or planeswalker would die this turn, exile it instead. If you are the blue-red spells deck, this seems fine because it's probably going to be at a bare minimum an expensive shock, and I think it's much more likely that it's going to be Bolt or bigger. This is your removal in that blue-red spells deck. If you're not in the blue-red spells deck, you probably just don't play this, which means if you are in the blue-red spells deck, solidly by pack 2 or pack 3, you might wheel this. I wouldn't expect to, because somebody might take this to get into that deck early on in the draft, but it's possible. This is basically a 1-deck card, and in that deck it's going to be like a pretty good B-, maybe even a B. Up next is Catharsis Reunion. Catharsis Reunion is 1 and a red for a sorcery at common. As an additional cost to cast the spell, discard 2 cards, draw 3 cards. I'm not the biggest fan of Catharsis Reunion. Discarding 2 cards is not easy. It's not difficult, but it's also not easy. Drawing 3 cards is nice. It is sorcery speed, unfortunately, and I do feel like we've gotten a little bit spoiled with Thrill of Possibility lately being an instant speed draw 2 card. So I don't know, we'll see if Catharsis Reunion gets any better. Having a dedicated blue-red spells deck could make it better, as this would trigger the spells matter stuff. It would put it into the graveyard for things like Blitz of the Thunder Raptor, and it refills your hand, getting rid of hopefully 2 lands that you don't care about. So I'll keep an eye on Catharsis Reunion. I have a feeling if it has a place that's decent, it's going to be that blue-red spells deck. But it didn't impress me the last time we saw it in Kaladesh. So we'll see if it impresses me here or not. My expectation is this is around a C-. Up next is Clash of Titans. Clash of Titans is 3 red for an instant at uncommon. Target creature fights another target creature. There is no your opponent controls or you controls on this. You can have 2 of your opponent's creatures fight each other. Now, don't get too excited. We've had similar cards. It's just not that common that you're going to get a perfectly matched pair that are going to kill each other off. When it can happen, that's awesome, but it's not going to happen that often. Very, very, very frequently, you're going to be having your opponent's creatures kill one of the other opponent's creatures, not both of them at the same time. And unfortunately, that, if you think it through, means their biggest creature is probably going to be killing their second biggest creature, so this doesn't even kill their biggest creature. Now, you don't have to do both opponents' creatures. You can do yours if you just have bigger than their biggest one. So this does have some flexibility to it, so I do think it's totally fine. I'm not going to say no to Clash of Titans in probably any of my red decks. That said, I don't think I want to load up on these. They're expensive, but instant speed is nice. But yeah, you just need the right situations, just like any fight spell that doesn't pump. So I'm going to look at the first of these to be like a B minus, maybe, sort of a very, 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 very strong C plus. But I do think they fall off quickly. I don't think I would play a second copy. Up next is Cloud Piercer. Cloud Piercer is 4 and a red for a creature dinosaur at common. It's a 5/4 with reach. When this creature mutates, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. And its mutate cost is 3 and a red. This is a whole lot of power and toughness for 4 mana. A 5/4 for 4 that rummages and has reach. If you can put this onto a 1, 2, or 3 drop on curve, it's going to be very good. Obviously, like a lot of these mutate creatures, it looks mediocre. I guess it's fine ish as just a big dumb creature at 5 mana. I don't hate 5 mana big dumb creatures as much as I hate kind of higher mana costs than that. So the fail case isn't the worst thing in the world, but you definitely want to be mutating this, and I don't think you want to be going too deep on these. I think it's just like a C. It's a common mutate card. They're not all busted, thankfully. Up next is Drannit Stinger. Drannit Stinger is 1 and a red for a creature human wizard at common. It's a 2/2. Whenever you cycle another card, Drannit Stinger deals 1 damage to each opponent, cycling 1. This is a great payoff for the red-white cycling deck. It's common, which means it's not going to be uncommon for you to have perhaps a couple of these in your deck on average. Remember, there should be 2.5 per draft pod of 8. Yeah, dealing 1 damage to the opponent doesn't sound like much, but if you're cycling 3, 4, 5 times in a game, that's 3, 4, 5 damage. If you have 2 of these, that's upwards of 10 damage. That's not much damage you have left to do to actually kill them off. I think Drannit Stinger is going to be one of the best, if not the best, common payoffs for this deck, and you're going to want to load up on them. If you are not in that deck, this card is significantly worse. It's going to be a vanilla 2/2 if you don't have enough cycling. So you want to make sure you have a threshold of cycling before you put this in your deck. So in the right deck, I think it is a super duper strong C+. Other decks, you probably want to cut it if you can, like a C-. Up next is Everquill Phoenix. Everquill Phoenix is 2 red for a creature Phoenix at rare. It's a 4/4 flyer. Whenever this creature mutates, create a red artifact token named Feather with 1. Sacrifice Feather. Return target Phoenix card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. This is the only Phoenix that you'll be returning. It's got a mutate cost of also 4, but it's 3 and a red instead of 2 red. So we've got a 4/4 flyer for 4, which is already pretty darn solid in red. But we also have a 4/4 flyer for 4 with haste if we mutate it onto something that's already been on the battlefield. And when we do that, we get recursion to get this Phoenix back, even if they do kill it that first time. Then if they kill it a second time, they have to do it before it's mutated again, or there are more feathers. Everquill Phoenix looks like a bomb. It just looks really hard to kill. It just looks really powerful for what it is. On curve, it's going to bust some games wide open. Seems like a solid, I think, just straight up A. Doesn't win the game instantaneously, so we're not going to go A+, but I think it is a strong A. Up next is Ferocious Tigerilla. Ferocious Tigerilla is 3 red for a creature cat ape at common. It's a 4/3. Ferocious Tigerilla enters the battlefield with your choice of a trample counter or a menace counter on it. 4 mana 4/3 trample is okay. 4 mana 4/3 menace is maybe slightly better, but I think they're both very, very, very equal in this case. Unlike the flyer one, where you're always going to choose flying and not first strike. This one, I think you might have kind of a choice depending on what the other board state looks like, or perhaps what your future mutation plans look like. I think this is just totally fine. It's definitely above filler, not too much though, so I'm not sure if we're going to go up to a C+ on this. 4/3 for 4 with menace. I think we can go up to a C+ just for the versatility. C+ for Ferocious Tigerilla. Up next is Fire Prophecy. Fire Prophecy is 1 and a red for an instant at common. Fire Prophecy deals 3 damage to target creature. You may put a card from your hand on the bottom of your library. If you do, draw a card. It's Lightning Bolt, but it costs 2 mana. We are well used to that by now. It's been at least 6, 7, 8 years since we've been paying 2 mana for 3 damage at instant speed. Can't hit face, unfortunately. That's a bit sad, but you're usually hitting a creature instead. But being able to get a rummage attached to that for, by all intents and purposes, free, it's fantastic. This is just super, super good red card. It's got an incredibly good chance of being the best red common. You're going to pick this relatively highly. Hopefully it's not the first pick in your pack. You'd prefer something a little more unconditional or more bomby, but could be the first pick in a weak pack. I think this is just a solid B- for Fire Prophecy. Up next is Flame Spill. Flame Spill is 2 and a red for an instant at uncommon. Flame Spill deals 4 damage to target creature. Excess damage is dealt to that creature's controller instead. This is Super Duper Death Ray from Unstable. Super Duper Death Ray was 2 and a red for an instant. It dealt 4 damage to target creature, and it had Trample. Now, it looks as though they have decided that they are not going to give instants and sorceries trample like they did in Unstable, but of course this functions exactly the same. So while everybody's talking about how Ikoria feels like Unstable because it's got Host Augment in Mutate, well, here's an actual literal card from Unstable that has now made its way to Black Border. Anyways, this is a great card. It's 3 mana for 4 damage to a creature, and if you happen to trample over some damage to the player, cool, but it's 4 damage, instant speed. It's going to kill even more than Fire Prophecy for just 1 more mana. Very strong pick. You'll pick this first pick out of, I think, a good number of packs. It's still not unconditional, but it's getting closer. So I think this is just a B for Flame Spill. Up next is Footfall Crater. Footfall Crater is a single red mana for an enchantment aura at uncommon, enchant land. Enchanted land has tap, target creature gains trample and haste until end of turn, cycling for 1 generic mana. I don't really entirely know how I feel about this card. It's a super low cost at only 1 mana, so it's hard to blow out since it enchants lands as well. They're not going to bounce your land and get rid of this aura, and you can cycle it if it's just not going to be impactful. Still, I don't like putting in my cards in my deck that just grant haste. Granting trample is obviously a nice upgrade there, but still, this just feels like one of those cards where you can think about the upside too much and not think about how unimpactful it is all the times that you don't draw your super gigantic thing. Like if I'm giving my 2/2 trample, oh boy, or my 3/3, it's just not going to be that impactful. Ultimately, I think the impact is just way too low for Footfall Crater, so I'm actually going to go with a D-. I just don't think I'm ever actually going to play this card. D- for Footfall Crater. Up next is Forbidden Friendship. Forbidden Friendship is 1 and a red for a sorcery at common. Create a 1/1 red dinosaur creature token with haste and a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. So you get a 2/2 for 2, but it's split up into 2. I'm not really a huge fan of that, but I guess you can mutate onto the 1/1 dinosaur at least. You can't mutate onto the human because mutate does say non-human. But I do just feel like there are better cards. If you're going wide, if you are in a red-white go-wide deck, then I think this is obviously a card that you're going to very much want, just like you want Goblin, whatever it was that made 2 goblins, or you wanted Raise the Alarm that made 2 1/1 soldiers or whatever. If that's your plan, this is going to be the way to go. But if your plan is to be a little bit more mid-rangey or needing creatures that actually have impact to them, Forbidden Friendship's just not going to get there. So this is going to range from a C- to like a C. It's not a big range, but it is a range depending on the deck. Up next is Frenzied Raptor, which does not look like Frenzied Raptor used to look. But this Frenzied Raptor is still a 2 and a red creature dinosaur at common for a 4/2. Very unimpactful. It's going to die. It's going to trade down to 2-drops and even some 1-drops. It doesn't do anything. It's not a good mutate platform because it has no abilities. I don't want to turn most of my mutate creatures into 4/2s. So this card just seems like it really doesn't have much of a home at all. Perhaps if you're struggling for playables and you're looking to curve out with some really big power aggro and you're just going to hopefully hope that your opponent can't block it, well, it's okay, but that's about the only place I'd play it. I think this is a very weak C- at best. Up next is frillscare mentor. Frillscare mentor is 2 and a red for a creature human warrior at uncommon. It's a 3/2. When frillscare mentor enters the battlefield, put a menace counter on target non-human creature you control. Pay 2 and a red, tap, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control with menace. Menace is the red-black mechanic, and it is on or given by, or potentially on or potentially given by 8 cards below rare in the set, which makes it the second least represented mechanic under rare. The only one that's worse is, of course, lifelink, which we talked about yesterday. So I don't know if you're really going to go off with frill scare mentor exactly. A menace counter, though, is very nice. I think most of your non-humans would be very happy with a menace counter, whereas vigilance counter I'm not as excited by. And if you can give that creature and potentially other creatures more +1/+1 counters, that's going to be pretty decent. As I said yesterday, and as I'll probably say tomorrow, I'm going to have to play with these mentors to really get a good feel for them. It is just going to suck when they're the only creature that you can play on curve and you have to play them for no value. But yeah, I'll keep an eye on them. I expect they're probably going to fall around the B- range, except for those times where you just super duper luck into having everything have the right mechanic on it. So let's go with a B+ for frill scare mentor. Up next is Go for Blood. Go for Blood is 1 and a red for a sorcery at common. Target creature you control fights target creature you don't control, cycling for 1. So it's prey upon, but it costs more for some reason. It's not instant speed. It doesn't give any toughness or power boost. I don't know why this has to cost 2 mana. Still, unlike prey upon, it has cycling, which means if this isn't going to have a use, you can just throw it away and turn it into a new card, which I think you should do some amount of the time. But like prey upon, I think this is going to be somewhere around a strong C+, but a strong C+ at absolute best. Fight spells that don't give power and toughness boost just do not perform quite as well. You need to have some big beefy creatures, and red doesn't naturally have that. You kind of really need to pair this with green, I think, generally. Up next is Heightened Reflexes. Heightened Reflexes is a single red mana for an instant at common. Target creature gets +1/+0 until end of turn. Put a first strike counter on it. I do love super cheap red combat tricks that give a power boost and first strike, and this does that, and the first strike stays, which is actually pretty powerful. Now my favorite is, I believe, Sure Strike, which is +3/+0. That's going to kill something. +1/+0. That's a much more narrow window that this is actually going to get to kill something, so I don't think it's going to be quite as good as Sure Strike. But having the first strike counter stick around is going to be a pretty good game depending on what it's put on. So I think this is going to be like a strong C. I think this might be one of the better common combat tricks in the set. I'm going to be afraid of it. So be aware, if you've got a weird attack coming at you and you're thinking about blocks, if it's just off by 1 and they're red, think about Heightened Reflexes. Up next is Lava Serpent. Lava Serpent is 5 and a red for a creature elemental serpent at common. It's a 5/5 with haste and cycling for 2. 6 mana 5/5 haste does not excite me in any way, shape, or form. Cycling for 2 is fine. This is probably a card that's just filler level. You can play it if you want to, because at the worst case, you don't get anywhere near 6 and you just pay 2 and turn this into a different card. And if you happen to find yourself at 6, well, you have a 5/5 haste, which doesn't suck. It just sucks if you have this sitting in your car or in your hand and you can't actually put it down. So it's probably like a fine C, but I'm not going to go out of my way to play it. Up next is our first Planeswalker of the set. We got 4 days in without talking about a Planeswalker. This is Luca, Coppercoat Outcast. Luca is 3 red for a legendary Planeswalker. Luca, I think he starts with 5 loyalty. +1, exile the top 3 cards of your library. Creature cards exiled this way gain. You may cast this card from exile as long as you control a Luca Planeswalker. -2, exile target creature you control, then reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature card with higher converted mana cost. Put that card onto the battlefield and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. -7, his ultimate, each creature you control deals damage equal to its power to each opponent. Luca looks pretty good, but does not defend himself, which is the biggest problem here. 5 loyalty for 5 mana is very good. His +1 is card draw, which is pretty nice. Now you do have to keep him alive, but he'll be at 6 loyalty right away, so he hopefully will stay alive for at least a turn or 2 for you to actually get your hands on those cards. My slight concern here would be casting him on curve and then activating his +1. You're already down to 25 cards in your library. And then if you keep activating his +1, you are going to rapidly run out of cards. So you actually can't do this forever. So his ultimate actually has a sort of a built-in limit of only happening once in a game. So if you're going to ultimate Luca, you need to be killing your opponent or putting your opponent in a situation in which they will die very shortly. His -2 is what is slightly scary just because of the fact that all of your little 1 or 2 drops that you might have had are going to upgrade into much better things. The slight concern here is you do need to keep track of your deck. You do need to know what your top creature is, and you need to know how many targets you have. If you're going to get rid of a 3-drop, you need to know how many 4, 5, 6, 7 drops you have in your deck. If you lose track of that, you could end up actually just whiffing potentially on exiling a creature, and you don't get that creature back. So be very careful with his -2. It's going to require that you really know your deck. If you're playing online, which all of us are, have a screenshot of your deck handy so that you know exactly what's going on. His -7, though, if you have established your board, probably just ends the game, or at least basically ends the game. It depends on exactly what your board looks like. I think overall Luca is fine, although nothing exactly stands out from him. The card draw hopefully is what's really going to help you. You're going to be able to get more creatures into your quote-unquote hand than you would have otherwise. So I do think Luca is still a fine B. I'm never not going to play him, but I think there's just a bunch of things about him where you need to be a little careful. Keep an eye on how big your deck is. Remember what has been taken out of your deck when you're going to do the -2. Otherwise, you could find yourself in some trouble. Up next is Momentum Rumbler. Momentum Rumbler is 3 and a red for a creature dinosaur at uncommon. It's a 3/3. Whenever Momentum Rumbler attacks, if it doesn't have first strike, put a first strike counter on it. Whenever Momentum Rumbler attacks, if it has first strike, it gains double strike until end of turn. Very interesting design here. So it's a 3/3 for 4. That's a hill giant and not a card that we play. But the very first time that it attacks, which hopefully will be the next turn, it becomes a 3/3 first strike for 4, which is fine. Totally fine, I would say. Then all future attacks, it is a double striker. It does not get a double strike counter. It does not keep it, so it's only a double striker on attacks. It is never a double striker on defense, remember that, but it is always a first striker on defense after that first attack. This seems like a very good card, and it seems like one of those cards that I'm just absolutely terrified of stumbling in this format. I'm terrified of stumbling in Magic regardless these days, because snowbally tends to be the name of the game, and this is snowbally. If your opponent stumbles or in any way fails to establish their board by more than like 1 creature, this represents 9 damage over the first 2 attacks, which is very scary for a 4-drop. And then if you can imagine putting a mutated flyer on this and giving it flying, yikes, very scary. I think this card's very good. I don't think it's quite in the first pick range. I think you're still looking at this kind of definitely after bombs, definitely after unconditional removal, and probably even after conditional removal. So I think it is sort of like the high mid-pack pick, but I think it is a B- nonetheless. It looks very scary, and it's definitely a card that you just play optimistically, because when you snowball, you are going to be nigh on unbeatable. Up next is Mythos of Adrock. Mythos of Adrock is 2 red for a sorcery at rare. Mythos of Adrock deals 5 damage divided as you choose among any number of target creatures and/or planeswalkers. If white-blue was spent to cast this spell until your next turn, those permanents can't attack or block, and their activated abilities can't be activated. This is totally fine and playable for just a red deck. It'll kill 1 big thing, or maybe a couple of small things, but then if you happen to Jeskai it out, you can ping 5 things and get in a big attack. It doesn't exactly feel like the rare that I definitely want to see in my pack, but I will probably first pick it out of that pack and not feel, the worst about it. I think it's a B. I don't think it's any better than a B, but just a B. And that's really regardless of what option you're using. I'm not going to break my mana base to try to Jeskai this out. I'm just going to use it as a 5 damage burn spell. Up next is Porcupine. Porcupine is 3 and a red for a creature bird beast at uncommon. It's a 3/4. Tap it. This creature deals X damage to any target where X is the number of times this creature has mutated. This pinger doesn't require you to pay. Oh boy, if common pingers are going to go forward requiring you to pay, that's going to suck. Anyways, its mutate cost is 2 and a red. This is frankly terrifying, and I love pingers. I love pingers so much. My one and only mystery draft that I got to do, I did a pinger deck, and it was lovely. And yeah, this is going to be super fun. You really only need to mutate this 1 single time, and you're going to be able to just start pinging off X1s, really making combat a mess, and just doing inevitability to the opponent, just dealing 1 to them each time. If you happen to get greedy and mutate a second time and start dealing 2 damage, that's very scary. This card seems amazing. I'm going to first pick this out of a lot of packs that are missing a bomb or removal, and this might be one of my favorite cards in the set. So we'll see how it works out. I'm super excited by it. I've got to go with like a B+ on Porcupine. I think it's just really good. Up next is Prickly Marmoset. Prickly Marmoset is 2 and a red for a creature monkey. At common, it's a 2/3 with first strike. Whenever you cycle a card, Prickly Marmoset gets +2/+0 until end of turn. A 2/3 first strike for 3 is okay. It's a little bit fillery. It's something that I would not go out of my way to play, but I would if I needed a creature. If I'm in the cycling deck, or if I have a lot of cycling cards, making it a 4/3 first strike, that's okay. I feel like we've actually seen that card. I think it was Wolves or something. Maybe they didn't have first strike. Yes, Brazen Wolves from Eldritch Moon. They did not have first strike, but they were 2/3s that became 4/3s. Yeah, so first strike obviously is going to make this a little bit better. If you are regularly cycling, this could be pretty decent. As well, your opponent has a huge threat of activation of, should I block this or not? If I block this, maybe it's a 4/3 first strike and my creature dies. If I don't block it, what if my opponent cycles twice and I take 6 when I thought I was going to take 2? There's definitely some stuff going on here, and I think this is going to be very much at home in the red-white cycling deck. I think it's still going to be like a C+. I don't think this is something that you're taking to get into that deck, or something that you say, aha, I made it, I'm finally got the payoff for my deck, but I think it is going to be a very good include in it. So C+ for Prickly Marmoset in that deck. If you're not in that deck, C-. Up next is Pyroceratops. Pyroceratops is 3 and a red for a creature elemental dinosaur at common. It's a 2/3 with trample. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Pyroceratops. I don't entirely know what happened here, but this is a functional reprint of Pyrehound from Shadows of Innistrad. Every single thing about this is the same, except it was an elemental hound instead of an elemental dinosaur. Literally the only change. I lied. Pyrehound was explicitly instant or sorcery, whereas this is non-creature spell. This is prowess, whereas Pyrehound was prowish. Pyroceratops should be very much at home in the blue-red spells deck, just as Pyrehound was in the blue-red spells deck in Eldritch Moon, even though it was in Shadows the set before. This card should be a huge payoff. Making this a 3/4 trample once, because of that one counter the first time, makes this card totally solid, and from there it just becomes a massive threat. You're going to want as many of these as you can possibly get in that blue-red spells deck, and that makes this like a B- in the blue-red spells deck. It's very important to that deck. Outside of that deck, it's significantly worse. If you're not reliably activating this, you are so overpaying for a 2/3 trample that it's just insane. So make sure you're in the right deck for this, but when you are, you're going to want as many of these as you can. Up next is Raking Claws. Raking Claws is 1 and a red for an instant at common. Target creature gains double strike until end of turn, cycling for 2 generic mana. Well, at least it's not Temur Battle Rage, and it's not also giving trample. It's a good thing trample is not a thing that can be just, given willy-nilly by counters or anything. This is going to be very scary. At common, nonetheless, you are going to see this a lot, and some games are going to end just because you made them have it and they had it. This terrifies me. This is going to be probably the most grown testiest card, at least when you get blown out by a mythic or something like that, or when your opponent plays some uncommon and flips something off the top of their library and it's the best card in the entire set and they get it for free. That's going to suck. But this is going to be worse because it's common and you're going to see it a bunch. So if your opponent's attacking and they've got 2 mana up, one of which is red, you kind of have to assume that their creature is actually twice the size. This frightens me. This frightens me. I know we've had Temur Battle Rage and Uncaged Fury and stuff like that, but I feel like those sets had smaller creatures. Not every creature could literally fly due to counters like they can in this set. There were bounce spells as opposed to the sorcery speed bounce that we get in this set. This is just going to be the biggest grown test card. It's going to be the most common card where we're having a fun game of Magic and oops, it ended. I don't think it's good because all of those situations where the creature is blocked or the double damage doesn't kill the opponent and doesn't finish the game off are not going to be very good. So I'm probably not going to be one to actually play this card too much, although maybe I'll give it a bit of more of a go since it does have cycling on it, but it just scares me a lot. So I'm going to put this at like a C despite all of that terror. That's how I'm going to play it. That's how I'm going to approach it. I am 100% going to die and get blown out by it, and it's going to be the worst thing in the world. Up next is Reptilian Reflection with terrifying and 100% Jurassic Park inspired raptors. 2 and a red for an enchantment at uncommon. Whenever you cycle a card, you may have Reptilian Reflection become a 5/4 dinosaur creature with trample and haste, in addition to its other types until end of turn. I do not like this. This is not what I would consider to be a payoff for the cycling deck. Payoffs for cycling decks, A, need to be really good and useful at instant speed, because you want to be holding back your counter spells, holding back your burn spells, your removal, etc. And then when, you don't have to use them, well, you cycle something else in your hand, or cycle that counter spell that's never going to get used. And then you ping, or you gain life, or you loot, or you tap. Here, you get a 5/4 during your opponent's end step, and then it stops being a 5/4. Big whoop. To really do much of anything other than surprise block, and it's not even a surprise because it's on the battlefield, this has to be cycling in your main phase. And that's not how you want to use your cycling. And cycling payoffs need to do things multiple times. If I'm going to cycle 3 cards and have a huge turn, I get a 5/4 that becomes a 5/4 that becomes a 5/4, doesn't attack because it's my opponent's end step, and then goes away. This card looks awful. I think it's an F. I don't want to play this card in any way, shape, or form. There are significantly better payoffs for the cycling deck. Go get them. Don't get this one. Up next is Rooting Moloch. Rooting Moloch is 4 and a red for a creature lizard at uncommon. It's a 4/4. When Rooting Moloch enters the battlefield, exile target card with a cycling ability from your graveyard. Until the end of your next turn, you may play that card, cycling for 2 generic mana. This seems not bad in the cycling deck. It's a 5 mana 4/4, which is, it's not good. But it draws you a card, and that card is specifically the cycling card, which does unfortunately mean you need to have a cycling card in your graveyard. Otherwise, you are playing a vanilla 4/4. Now be aware, cycling is not a casting cost, so you can play the card. You cannot cycle the card, however. Cycling is actually an activated ability of the card. Now that might make you think, well, wait a minute, I'm paying 5 mana for this. How am I going to play another card? Well, keep in mind this is until the end of your next turn, so you do get a turn of being fully untapped to actually play that card. So I think this card is fine in the red-white cycles deck, or maybe red-blue spells if you have enough cycling in your spells deck. I'm going to have to look more at how much cycling is in that deck specifically. I think it's a fine include. I think the plan, though, is if you're looking at your board and you don't need a 4/4, although how often do you not need a 4/4, right? You could just cycle this if you don't have any good targets to get full value off of it. So yeah, I think this is a fine include. I don't think it's a payoff. It's obviously significantly better of a cycling card than the last one we just talked about, but I think it is in like the C+ category, maybe the B-, but that's about it. Up next is Rumbling Rockslide. Rumbling Rockslide is 3 and a red for a sorcery at common. Rumbling Rockslide deals damage to target creature equal to the number of lands you control. This is a very good card. We've seen cards like this before. It is sorcery speed, so it is not perfect, but you are going to have a number of lands. Remember, when you cast this, it's going to be at least for 4 damage, which is pretty good. That's going to kill the majority of the format. And then any later in the game, it's going to be basically unconditional removal. This card's very good. It's very good for a common. It might make the top 3 commons. I'm pretty sure this might make the top 3 commons. Fire Prophecy, of course, is going to be in there, but I think this might make the top 3 commons. It's going to be like a B. I think just a B. For whatever reason, for me at least, this card, I understand it's good and it reads bad to me, but it's not bad. It's just good. I think it's just a B for Rumbling Rockslide. I guess maybe since it's a sorcery, we could knock it down to B-, but it's definitely in the B range. Up next is Sanctuary Smasher. Sanctuary Smasher is 4 red for a creature Rhino Beast at uncommon. It's a 6/4 with first strike. Cycle it for 2 and a red. When you cycle it, put a first strike counter on target creature you control. This card's totally fine. If you happen to have 6 mana and you cast this, you get yourself a 6/4 first striker, which is fantastic. If you're struggling to get to that 6 mana, pay 2 and a red, cycle this, give something else first strike, maybe a 3/3 or a 4/4, something like that, and also draw yourself a card. This card just seems totally fine, and being in red means that it goes in the red-white cycle deck. Unfortunately, you're going to be fighting because I think every red deck's going to play this. So yeah, Sanctuary Smasher seems great. I think it is just a solid B-. I think maybe it would need evasion to get into like the B or B+ territory. So let's go with a B- for Sanctuary Smasher. Up next is Shredded Sails. Shredded Sails is 1 in a red for an instant at common. Choose 1, destroy target artifact, or Shredded Sails deals 4 damage to target creature with flying. Not a mode, but you can also cycle it for 2 mana. This is one of those interesting cards that will train new players on how cycling works. This is a card that you would never, ever, ever, ever main deck if it didn't say cycling 2. However, you will always main deck this if you have a spot in this set, I believe. There aren't too many artifacts, and not too many of them demand being destroyed by specific artifact hate. There are a good number of flyers, and so Shredded Sails will come into play more often for the flying damage than it will for destroying an artifact. But if you end up against a red-green opponent, they don't have many flyers or any flyers, they don't have any artifacts, you still get to just pay 2 mana, throw this away, and draw another card instead. Maybe you side this out in going into game 2 and game 3, but it's totally okay to be in the main deck. That said, I'm not saying jam this in every main deck. If you have 23 better cards, play the 23 better cards. But if you have a spot, go ahead, put Shredded Sails in. It's not a sideboard only card like it would be if it didn't have cycling. So it's like a C-, we'll say. C- for Shredded Sails. Up next is Spell Eater Wolverine. Spell Eater Wolverine is 2 in a red for one hell of an angry Wolverine. It's a 3/2 creature Wolverine at common. Spell Eater Wolverine has double strike as long as there are 3 or more instant and/or sorcery cards in your graveyard. 3 mana 3/2, totally filler creature. If it has double strike, it's a little bit better. I don't know if the blue-red spells deck wants this. I think there are better payoffs like the Pyroceratops or the Prickly Marmoset even, plus all the other things. But if you have a spot, you can throw this in. This reminds me of Bloodhaze Wolverine, also a Wolverine actually, from the last time we had a blue-red spells deck. Was that Eldraine? I think that was Eldraine. It wasn't exactly a spells deck, but similar in style. So I think this is around a C, even in the correct deck. Outside of the correct deck, it's a C-, just filler. Up next is Tentative Connection. Tentative Connection is 3 in a red for a sorcery at common. This spell costs 3 less to cast if you control a creature with menace. Gain control of target creature until end of turn. Untap that creature. It gains haste until end of turn. I don't understand anything about the spell reduction. I don't understand the flavor or why it matters. Having a 1 mana active treason doesn't really change anything, I don't think, because as always, you should only be active treasoning if you are going to be ending the game. Doing this to get in 3-4 extra damage and take your opponent all the way down to 12 is a waste of this card. You should be saving this for when it ends the game. Now, you can use this to sacrifice. We have seen some cards, and in fact, we will see one more card that attempts to make an incredibly minor black-red sacrifice theme. I don't think it's going to be a huge plan, but it could work, and it is one of my favorite archetypes, so if it's possible, I will certainly give it a go. But yeah, this is a card that really shouldn't make most of your decks. Aggro decks are typically who want it the most. You just attack, and then one final attack where you steal their best blocker and you finish them off. But most decks, I find, don't really want an active treason. So this is like a C- in almost all decks. In aggro decks, it might go up to like a C. And if you can pull off black-red sacrifice, then this becomes a must-have card. We'll see if we can do that. Up next is Unpredictable Cyclone. Unpredictable Cyclone is 3 red for an enchantment at rare with a name that I'm sure I'm gonna love. I love unpredictability in my Magic cards. If a cycling ability of another non-land card would cause you to draw a card, which it always will in limited anyways, instead exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a card that shares a card type with the cycled card. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost, then put the exiled cards that weren't cast this way on the bottom of your library in a random order, and you can also cycle this for 2. So, there's a problem with this card. The majority of cards in this set that have cycling are instants and sorceries. There are a decent number of enchantments that have cycling, and an amount of creatures that have cycling, but the majority of cards that you're going to be cycling are instants and sorceries. Getting a random instant or sorcery that you have no idea what it's going to be off the top of your library that you have to cast right then and there is awful. Absolutely awful. Let's say that I cycle Raking Claws because I don't want to cast it, and then I top deck a Shredded Sails, and my opponent doesn't have an artifact or a flyer, and nothing happened. I don't even get to draw a card because this replaces my card draw. That is awful. Let's say I cycle something and I get my neutralize, I get my counterspell. There's no spells on the stack. I can't do anything with it. So I'm very hesitant about this. You want to be cycling your creatures so that you can get a free creature off the top. You know, it's going to be wild when you cycle one of your like little 2/2 humans with cycling and suddenly you have a giant red monster of some variety. That's going to be kind of the best thing that you can do, but it requires you to cycle your creatures, which your creatures I feel like are the best example of cards where the ideal is you actually get to play them and the cycling is kind of the backup plan. So I don't know. I don't think Unpredictable Cyclone actually works out the way you want it to. I'll keep an eye on it because it's possible that there's just enough cycling creatures that you're happy to throw them away and turn them into something else. But we'll see. We'll see. Cycling instants or sorceries into this is going to suck. I'm starting this at an F. I don't want to play it. Our second last card is Weaponize the Monsters. Weaponize the Monsters is a single red mana for an enchantment at uncommon. Pay 2, sacrifice a creature. Weaponize the Monsters deals 2 damage to any target. So here is the card I was talking about sacrificing, about the red-black sack deck that is not actually supported. There's only a few cards. But if you have this and you have 4 tentative connections somehow, you've actually got one heck of a threat. You pay, hopefully 1 mana for that tentative connection if you have a menace creature, and then you pay 2 mana into this, and you just have built your own removal spell. Outside of doing that, I don't know that this is really all that good, although it just might be. If you're going wide, this is actually somewhat frightening, because at some point you're going to have, 6 mana and 3 creatures that you don't care about, and your opponent's getting worse than a lava axe at some point. This is going to represent actually some amount of inevitability, assuming that you are a very creature-dense deck. So this card's going to be very interesting to watch. I think you have to have a deck that is going to take advantage of it. If your deck is a little bit lower on the creature side, this card's probably awful, but if your creature is creature-dense, I think this represents some pretty good inevitability. Remember how much inevitability the Lampad, was it a Lampad? I think it was a Lampad in Theros Beyond Death represented, and that was just dealing 1 damage. This is dealing 2 damage, and if you're not doing it to your opponent's face, you can shock creatures if you want to. I think the ideal is that you are doing this to your opponent's face to represent that inevitability, though. I'm going to keep an eye on this. I think this could wildly vary from anywhere from like a D to a B minus? That feels high, but yeah, let's say a B minus. So keep an eye on it, build around it, build towards it, know when to cut it. Our final card for today is Yidaro Wandering Monster. Yidaro Wandering Monster is 5 red for a legendary creature dinosaur turtle at rare. It's an 8/8 trample haste. You can cycle it for 1 and a red, and when you cycle Yidaro Wandering Monster, shuffle it into your library from your graveyard. If you've cycled a card named Yidaro Wandering Monster 4 or more times this game, put it onto the battlefield from your graveyard instead. I actually really like this card. I think it's very, very, very powerful. Obviously, 7 mana in a lot of red decks is a little bit of a pipe dream, but you sometimes hit it. And if you hit it, why not have an 8/8 trample haste? That's going to end some games. Now, if you are nowhere near getting towards 7 mana, which is going to be a chunk of the game, you just pay 1 and a red and throw this into your graveyard and then shuffle it back into your library and then draw a card, which could even be a Yidaro again. Doing that 4 times in a game might be a little bit of a pipe dream, but if you do pull it off, that's going to be amazing too. And even if you cycle this 3 times and then just have to cast it the 4th time, although I guess you will not do that because you would cycle it and you would get it back. So if you cycle this twice and then have to cast it for real on the 3rd time, it's still not that big of a deal. You still have an 8/8 trample haste that drew you 2 cards. Yidaro, I think, is going to be underrated a little bit. I think people are going to look at that mana cost. They're going to look at, I have to do it 4 times. That's never going to happen. And they're going to underrate it. I think it is a bomb. I think it is first pickable. I think it's very good. I'm going to go all in on Yidaro and give it a pretty low grade, I think. For hyping it up and saying that I'm going to go all in, I'm not giving it an A rating. I am just going to go with a strong B, I think, for Yidaro Wandering Monster. I do feel like I haven't given out many A's yet so far, but there are a lot more gold cards than normal, and gold, of course, tends to gobble up a lot of the A ratings now, doesn't it? But we'll get to those in a couple of days. That's going to wrap it up for the red set review. Let me know what cards you agree with, disagree with in this review. I think we gave kind of our lowest grades in red. Perhaps red is one of the weaker colors. But who knows? In this set, Mutate and everything has thrown things into absolute confusion. Let me know in the comments down below what you agree with, disagree with, what you are excited to play, etc. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, you can find me over on Twitter, Facebook, and Twitch. On Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, I will be playing Arena sealed all day, playing Ikoria, Lair of Behemoths. Wizards of the Coast has invited me to the early access event yet again, and so we're going to get a fully stocked account and just jam sealed all day long, and we might even try out Draft. Draft on Arena was better for Theros. Arena Draft did not get better. Theros was uniquely bad that made it feel okay. We'll see if that holds true for Ikoria or not as well. So make sure you check that out. As always, the easiest way is to like, share, and subscribe. But if you do have any questions, comments, or suggestions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll see y'all tomorrow.